So, Season 9 is right around the corner, and Blizzard announced earlier today that there's going to be a developer update live stream on Friday, June 27 at 11 a.m. Pacific. And they're going to talk about a lot of the changes that are coming in Season 9, Sins of the Horadrim. No official statement has been given regarding what day the next season will begin, but traditionally, when a campfire chat going over the final changes for the new season is announced, the new season often starts on the following Tuesday. Furthermore, the start of the new season directly coincides with when the current season's Battle Pass ends, so with all this in mind, we're looking at Season 9 starting on Tuesday, July 1st at 10 a.m. PST. Of course, this is barring any kind of delays on Blizzard's end. Now, I could end the video here, but in case you're not familiar with the upcoming changes, here are 5 things to note that are coming for next season. We have Nightmare Sigil updates, Horadric powers, Horadric jewels, Overpower nerfs, and basic skill adjustments. Starting with the Nightmare Sigil updates, the Nightmare Sigils are used to open Nightmare dungeons, and in the current game, Nightmare dungeons are only really used for farming Obdicite. In the upcoming season, these Nightmare dungeons are being reworked in such a way that they're going to give more rewards than just Obdicite from here on out. So, for example, there are these Nightmare Sigils that now have an affix called Forgotten Wisdom, and these Forgotten Wisdom Nightmare Sigils can give you 5 to 10 levels per dungeon as long as you make sure to collect all of the golden orbs that drop from the monsters in these dungeons. Cursed shrines and wells can appear and spawn even more monsters too, so make sure to hit those as you go along. And events in Nightmare Dungeons now give a lot more XP than what they used to. When you're level 60, this will be the fastest way to gain Paragon XP in the game, assuming they don't nerf it, so just keep that in mind. Of course, there are other useful Nightmare Sigil affixes too, like Treasure Goblins, Horadric Files, and Horadric Strongrooms. Speaking of which, Horadric Strongrooms are another feature added to Nightmare Dungeons too. So the way this one works is that it's sort of like a time attack dungeon where you select modifiers at the start and then go kill as many monsters as you can, kind of like an Infernal Hordes. Then when you clear the Horadric Strongroom, you'll get some loot including Horadric Files, which you'll need to unlock and upgrade your powers for this season. Finally, there's Nightmare Escalations. So the way this one works is that you need a Nightmare Escalation sigil to open it, and when you run it, you clear a Nightmare Dungeon, which then leads to another Nightmare Dungeon with more affixes, which then leads to a third Nightmare Dungeon with more affixes, and then you get to fight Astaroth. Next up, there's the Horadric Powers. Horadric powers are a new seasonal mechanic replacing the boss powers, and the way these powers work is that you craft a spell with its own effects, and attach that to one of your existing skills. So you would get a Catalyst, Infusion, and Arcanas. For the Catalyst, you choose from one of 5 attacks that work in different ways. The Infusion selects which element your Catalyst's damage will be, and gives some bonuses. And then the Arcana gives additional effects to your spell, such as letting you teleport, gain unstoppable, execute monsters. The list goes on, plus you can select 3 of these Arcana effects. That takes us to Horadric Jewels. If you are familiar with the occult gems from Season 7, then these work pretty much the exact same way. Each jewel goes into your jewelry sockets and has its own special effects, like giving you the ability to stack dot damage infinitely. To get these, you need to interact with the new content for this season, such as Horadric Strongrooms, to learn the recipes for crafting these jewels, and I presume you'll be able to craft them with Horadric Files. That should cover it for the seasonal mechanics, but now it would be a good time to discuss other aspects of the core game itself. If you are not already aware, Overpower has been overpowered for the last 3 seasons, and is finally receiving a hefty 80% nerf. Now, I don't know if they'll dial it back from 80% before the season goes live, but this adjustment does have some pretty big implications for many builds in the game. Most of the S tier builds were reliant on Overpower the past few seasons, such as Lightning Spear Sorcerer, Bloodwave Necro, and Cataclysm Druid, so this might bring them down a bit to be closer in power to non-Overpower builds. But there were many other less popular builds that relied on Overpower too, and I predict that they will feel even weaker as a result of this blanket nerf. Bear Druid builds, Rogues, Barbarians, Blood Surge Necro, and the list goes on and on. Anyway, before I get too sidetracked, I'm not here to discuss what Overpower should or shouldn't be. but just know that if you were playing some sort of Overpower build before, then it probably won't hit as hard now, unless Blizzard somehow reverts or adjusts this change in some way. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about the changes made to basic skills. Unlike past seasons, there were no adjustments made to the leveling system this season, aside from the addition of the Forgotten Wisdom Nightmare Sigils I mentioned earlier. But for most classes, a lot of basic skills did receive large damage buffs across the board, like we're talking double the damage or more in some cases. This should make it much easier to level on some builds, since you won't be entirely reliant on your other skills to do all the damage while leveling. How they were in the past was that you might use these basic skills for early leveling to do damage and generate resource on some classes, and then once you have your main skill, you would pretty much just ignore basic skills for the rest of the season. So it's a W that the developers are trying to make these weaker skills stronger. I think Blizzard's intention here might be to try and make basic skill builds a bit more viable than before for endgame, but if I am being honest, even with a 100 or 200% buff on some of these basic skills, I still don't think it's enough for the most part. So Blizzard, at least in my opinion, should go bigger and bolder with the changes to these basic skills. Most of these builds, as it stands, are still going to be much weaker, and it doesn't seem like they are fixing up uniques for basic skills. In fact, the uniques are getting nerfed to compensate for the higher base damage on basic skills. And still, Pain Gorger's gauntlets still don't transfer over all the damage they should be. So, sadly, while the changes might be good for leveling, I don't think the changes to basic skills will mean very much for most of these builds in the endgame. With all that said, dear viewer, how do you feel about the upcoming season? Personally, I'm interested in seeing how Season 9 turns out, and I'll be releasing Season 9 build guides for all of the classes pretty soon, so do look out for that. If you enjoyed the video, a like, comment, or subscribe is always appreciated, but otherwise, that's all from me. Adventure out.